Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Peter van der Putten. He is the director of the AI lab at Pegasystems. Peter, good to have you with us.
Yeah, great to be here.
And everybody's talking about AI. Why don't you begin with giving your best thinking to federal agencies on how to get started in the first place?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I'm an AI guy, right? So I'm easy to get carried away with anything that smells like AI, right? But I do what I also kind of have learned. I've been kind of, let's say, in the AI business already since the mid-90s. That it is really important to start with your, let's say, with your business problems first. What is it? What is it? What you're trying to achieve here? Is it all about customer centricity? Citizen centricity. Or is it about providing customer-centric service, citizen-centric service? Or is it more in the area of doing more with less, right? Improving your productivity. So I think it is good to start with the business problems, right? And work your way down to the technology. Or I think maybe I'm not giving AI enough credits here. It's not just technology, right? It is also a way of working, becoming more evidence-based as an organization.
Got it. And so it's fair to say in some cases, the idea of the outward facing and the internal productivity questions, they converge in some public sector applications.
Yeah, absolutely. I think ultimately it's all about the citizen, right? So I think when you say I want to make applying for a permit more seamless, or I want to provide better citizen service, then that's of course very much aligned. There are things that are maybe more unique for pure kind of citizen centricity, right? So or constituent centricity. Let's say if it's not just about providing service, but getting people to understand how to interact with the government in the first place. What are some of the benefits I'm entitled to, or programs that I'm entitled to, how to find my way. So nudging, similar to how commercial companies are nudging their customers to their products and services. The government could also take a proactive approach in really looking across the entire service offering and directing, providing a personalized one-to-one citizen experience where you point people to what the government can do for you. But then you get more into the middle, which is more around providing better service experiences, which kind of sounds like both good for citizens as well as good for efficiency, effectiveness. Of course, ultimately, there's always back office processes that are quite far removed from the citizen, or which maybe have nothing to do with citizens at all, but where we can still apply AI to become more efficient and more effective.
And the implication there then is that this is not just an IT decision, but it seems like a total team decision on where we want to go next with our agency. Yeah,
it's almost, we're talking, primarily to maybe to an IT audience here, but hush hush, it's almost not an IT decision. So I think, of course, as AI, you want to be ahead of the curve with technology and making sure that you can provide the latest and greatest technology to the business while still keeping the lights on. It's maybe an interesting topic to talk about as well. But ultimately, it's the it's the entire organization that needs to think about what are our strategic priorities and how do I work down from those top level strategic goals towards, hey, where do we want to become smarter about either how we want to do our interactions or how we want to run our processes.
And once you have made that decision where we're going to begin applying this first, then it's probably wise to set some realistic goals, achievable goals, but measurable goals, because I guess without measurement, how do you know it's doing any good for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes a lot of sense, the way you're saying it. But that's where things go wrong quite often, because people are thinking about like, oh, let's hire tons of AI people, AI engineers, or data scientists, or whatever it is, and then magically things will get better. Yeah, but that's of course the wrong way. It's very easy to get lost in the wonderful world of AI, similar to how a lot of organizations got lost in the world of data, right? So data is endless. You can improve data forever and you will never be done, right? So it is much better to start with outcomes, like you say, and like what are the various parts of the organization where we want to improve, and then work your way backwards, but also in the way how you set up AI in these interactions or in these processes, right? So I think it's really important to think in terms of feedback loops. So with that, I mean, it's like if I make a certain decision in a process, an automated decision in a process, let's say a certain application comes in from a company or a citizen who wants to do something, well, maybe we can already decide whether we can automatically approve it or not. But if not, we need to route it to the right team. That if it's a simple case, to the less experienced worker. If it's a more complex case, maybe it needs to go to a special department. Well, are we also checking, if we make that automated routing decision, are we also checking that the people that receive that then say, well, I'm indeed the right person to work on this, right? Or are we indeed checking, did they resolve it within SLA? And if we do, are we feeding that also back to the AI? And so in that sense, I think it's much better also to think in terms of these kind of small feedback loops, and make in that sense governments, running a government, a bit more evidence-based. Yeah, I think that will protect you also from these big initiatives where you know, like you don't really know whether you're doing the right thing, right? And that you can build it all the way back into kind of these micro applications of AI, where within one process, within one application, you're making automated decisions what to do, but you also capture that feedback and did I do the right thing? And can I make sure that I feed that back to the AI so that it essentially also can improve?
And how would you say artificial intelligence and its applications relate to this bigger question of modernizing IT? Because this is what every agency is also having to deal with. And there's money for modernizing IT, and everyone somehow feels like we've got to modernize. And so
Yeah.
maybe tie that together for us.
I think in most situations, people have the feeling there's no money at all. You know, like there's no money to modernize and innovate, and there's no money to keep the lights on. You know, like you're being pulled. If I'm the CIO of some agency, I'm being pulled from both directions, right? So from the operations people who say, well, we need to keep the lights on, and things are failing, and maybe if I talk to my architects, they say, well, we have a legacy of 700 applications. How can we do something new? But then we also have the innovation people, you know, that, you know, maybe certain promises have been made to the outside world on how we're going to do things better. So that really feels like a catch-22. Yeah. How can you innovate in such an environment? Because the cool AI kids, they go like, oh, you just start from scratch. Well, guess what? That's never going to work. You will not encounter a greenfield situation like that, especially not in government, right? So I think with that, you know, like pragmatic approaches can work well. You know, like we sometimes talk about, if you want to modernize, right? You shouldn't maybe rip and replace, you know, with these endless programs that we all hear about that take years and cost hundreds of millions. But maybe you need to think more in terms of rep and renew. Provide a nice kind of modern agility layer on top of the existing applications. Don't start with ripping out all the legacy applications. Let the computers do what they're good at, talking to other computers, right? Put like an innovation agility layer on top. And that's where you can do the innovation around automation. That's where you can do the innovation around AI. Let it talk to the backend system, right? So and then over time, you can do this kind of controlled migration, but your agility layer is already in place. You got your business processes running there, all the interactions that the people that your employees who interface with companies or citizens directly, they are used to kind of that new layer where everything is happening, and then it becomes more technical debt reduction, where you can swap out at your own pace as IT, swap out systems in the back end and start to renew that and consolidate that to make things simpler. But anyone who's using kind of this layer on top, they won't even notice, because from their perspective nothing is changing, right? So I think that's a much kind of more pragmatic and healthy way, and this rep and renew type approach to go about modernization. And then you can do the cool new innovation stuff like AI or low-code automation without having to replace everything, right? And have these huge programs that run for years. Yeah.
Yeah. So a faster and cheaper way to the goal, you might say.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. On that note, we'll take a short break. My guest today is Peter van der Putten. He is director of the AI Lab at Pega. I'm Tom Temin on Federal Insights Month, sponsored by Pega Systems here on Federal News Network. Welcome back to Federal Insights Month, sponsored by Pega Systems here on Federal News Network. My guest today is Peter van der Putten. He's director of the AI Lab at Pega Systems, and I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. And it probably sounds a little basic, but maybe, Peter, we should start this segment with maybe a definition of AI, because it's used so glibly and so ubiquitously, yet I'm not sure how carefully it's actually defined.
No, I think that's a great question, because we can easily get lost in if it becomes everything, it's nothing again, right? So and there's actually it is a complex multifaceted topic. One way to talk about is like a little bit in detail. Well, what is it in terms of definitions, right? And the other part is more like, oh yeah, but what are then some examples of AI capabilities? Yeah, so and so on one side, of course, AI means artificial intelligence. But when people hear that, they immediately get into the Hollywood blockbuster mode of AI that is taking over the world. But AI could also mean augmented intelligence, where it's working shoulder to shoulder with an employee or even with a citizen, and where it's really about working together to resolve a particular task. It's not just about something that autonomously replaces someone else, right? So I think it's especially in a societal context, government, etc. That's really important. The other thing that's important is that AI, it's also important. It's accepted intelligence, right? So we also maybe you saw the Senate hearings, like with all the AI moguls showing up and talking about how we can use AI ethically and responsibly. There's a new initiative at NIST, right, to look at proper application of generative AI, but also the White House also made a proposal actually for a policy proposal around a bill of rights for AI. So it's also important that AI is kind of accepted intelligence. So this is just a little play for me on providing some alternative perspectives on AI. I think the other way to think about it is like, what are some of these capabilities, right? Because if we browse the internet, we all think it's all about ChatGPT or generative AI or maybe machine learning. But AI is about systems that are solving tasks that otherwise might have looked intelligent in a way, right? So it's also about making sense of data, structured data, unstructured data, like text, for example. It's also about not just the machine learning, but also the machine reasoning. Like if we need to decide on whether to approve a permit, rules come into play as well. So we need to combine in that sense, and also, the new kids on the block and the machine learning and the generative AI with more like classical things like business rules or decisioning. How do we turn it into an overall decision? Also that respects kind of these ethical aspects of
And we've touched on it briefly a couple of times, but you can't really separate your AI strategy from your data strategy in some sense, because an AI algorithm without data is like a balloon with no air in it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's, I mean, it's an interesting topic, because it's tempting to just say, yeah, garbage in, garbage out, data is really important, etc. Because, I agree with that statement, actually, but it's almost like an empty statement. Of course, better data is good, right? I don't think that that's the problem necessarily. I think government organizations have a lot of data problems. The problem of understanding that data is important is not one of them. Yeah, I think people have that idea, but they don't know where to focus. Yeah,
Mhm.
there's so many places where data is wrong. Where do we even get started? Yeah, so I think the more interesting question is indeed, where do you start, with what kind of data? And that kind of is the key a little bit, because then you start to unlock, well, maybe we shouldn't start at the bottom. Yeah, maybe we shouldn't start with thinking about data and then and then we'll sort out what we're going to do with it. Let's first make the data better. Yeah, we should maybe flip it around and think about, like, oh, what is our business priority? Like we said in the beginning. Yeah, we want to provide uh, citizen-centric service. Okay, great. In what particular domain? Permits, or healthcare, or whatever it is. Okay, great. So what kind of automated decisions do we want to have that would support agents or citizens, to have a more to direct them to the right services, or to have a more frictionless journey? These kind of automated decisions. Okay. So I need to apply these rules. They require particular data. I want to build these type of models that understand the intent of the citizen, what they want to do. I need to do a little bit of NLP, natural language processing, on inbound emails. And so you work your way back from the top. Yeah, and I think that's answering the $1 million question of where do I get started?
Right. And it's not necessarily a big data requirement. It's more of a correct data requirement. Fair to say?
Exactly. Small data is beautiful.
Yeah, because the other issue with data is maybe the smaller your sample sufficient to train the algorithm, the less chance you could have bias into it, because you can maybe hand pick those data elements that you use to train it. But then the question becomes, okay, it's trained, it's clean, it's free of the biases that we don't want this to have. And biases can be any number of domains in which you don't
Mhm.
want that to happen. But then as it ingests data over time in production, uh, give us your thinking on how to make sure that the algorithm output doesn't drift away from that perfect mean you might have established
Yeah.
the outset, or let's say when you finished training in the outset of the deployment.
Yeah, great point. I think first off, and it's similar to what the discussion we already had. I think even in bias, fairness, that's incredibly important in a government domain. That we're not treating certain protected groups unfairly. That's not an area where we want to start bottom up with the data, and we need to start top down and think about, what is the decision about? It's about a certain maybe it's about being proactive about certain health benefits that people might apply to them, yeah, or deciding whether a permit is okay or not. So we need to start with those automated decisions, and then first make sure that we can detect bias. Can we run simulations where we can see indeed, are we treating certain groups unfairly? And that could be, the cause for that could be multiple things. Yes, it could be something that's inside of some of those machine learning models, but it could also be in some kind of decision rule that we built in, yeah, because they're also based on certain assumptions. So they could also be a cause of bias. Or indeed, it's not just when we develop these automated decisions that we need to look at. And you're saying, how do we make sure that beyond the development, and we also don't have things that are drifting? Yeah, so this is also, it's an exercise where we need to start with the automated decisions. We need to look broader than just machine learning models. We need to look at logic as well, and rules, the entire decision. And like you're saying, we need to look beyond just, we developed everything now, everything is okay. now we can forget about it. No, we need to continuously monitor in all the decisions that are being made, whether there's bias in those systems. And rules change quite often, right? So every time we make changes to rules or changes to models, we need to retest again.
It seems like you should almost have a reference case or a set of reference cases that you run through the outset to make sure this is how we want the answers to be arrived at. Not
Yeah.
this is not the
Yeah, and
answer.
then you could do different. What I see our clients do is multiple things. First, a historical data set. What are those previous applications or whatever? You can keep a data set like that, and you can test on historical data. If I make changes to rules or models, do I get different distributions across different protected groups who are
Mhm.
accepted or declined a particular service, for example? But you can also simulate data. You can use generative AI to generate very specific data sets that maybe have very specific setups, of particular groups that you want to test even more. You can make synthetic data and then also test your strategies on that synthetic data more for the more boundary cases.
Sure. So,
Absolutely.
so the real lesson here then is AI deployments are not set and forget. They don't run like old-fashioned database query programs, and you don't have to tend to them very much. These take both for ethical and programmatic outcomes, maintenance and constant attention. Fair to say?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair to say. I think actually in that sense, we get back to it's almost closing the circle behind me, because we get back to that AI in a way is also a business activity, right? Yes, you need to set up a whole architecture and connect it to data and make sure it's plugged into those interactions or into those processes. But then it's an ongoing maintenance of new rules arrive, new models arrive, and that's change at not at the IT strategic architecture level or even at we deployed a particular project level. It's business as usual operations, right? So it's our clients are changing these things literally on a daily basis, and sometimes it's an emergency change they need to be able to put through in an hour. So it's a completely different cycle, a really
Right.
operational cycle then.
Yeah, so then it really belongs in that sense, both to the program manager and to the IT staff to make sure they're in touch with one another to make sure that this machine that we've built is doing what it should.
And the problem owners. So if I'm in service, it's that area. If I'm in permits, it's in that other area. Or if I'm in health benefits, and so because ultimately the problem owner, that's where the rules and the models, etc., actually come from. So in many cases.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for a great discussion today. My guest has been Peter van der Putten. He's director of the AI lab at Pegasystems. Great having you with us.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
And I'm Tom Temin. You're listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, please visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Pegasystems.